The August air over Red Pine County was thick with the scent of pine and the faint tang of early morning dew. The sun still struggling to rise over the horizon. It was 6:15 a.m. when 17-year-old Vanessa Crawford stepped out of her small apartment on East Main Street, backpack slung over one shoulder, lunchbox in hand. She was on her way to the bus stop, like she had done every weekday since school started that September. But this morning would be different. This morning the world she knew would vanish. Vanessa's friends later recalled seeing her waiting at the bus stop, checking her watch repeatedly, her auburn hair glinting in the pale light. A neighbor, Mr. Wilkins, saw her smile as she waved to a passing jogger. It was a small gesture, ordinary, yet the last moment of normality anyone would remember for decades. When the school bus rolled by at 6:45 a.m., Vanessa was not on it. She had vanished, leaving behind her backpack and a folded note, untouched and cryptic. "I'll be back before the sun sets." Her disappearance would confound Red Pine County authorities for 16 years. Initial searches were exhaustive. Officers combed the nearby trails, inspected abandoned cabins along Pine Lake, and interviewed every neighbor and passerby. Volunteers spread out in a grid pattern across the county's dense forest and marshlands. Flyers with Vanessa's smiling face plastered every light pole and storefront from Red Pine to neighboring towns. Every tip was followed, every lead pursued. Yet as weeks turned into months and months into years, the trail went cold. Witnesses remembered fragments, stray sightings of a red car on East Main Street, an unfamiliar truck idling near the park, but nothing concrete ever surfaced. Vanessa was not a stranger to diligence and routine. Her diary, discovered months later in her room, revealed a thoughtful, ambitious young woman. She dreamed of studying environmental science at the University of Minnesota, had a passion for hiking and bird-watching, and was known for her volunteer work at the local animal shelter. She was careful, cautious, yet her last note suggested she was leaving with purpose, not fear. Did she plan to meet someone? Or had someone manipulated her trust in the morning haze of summer? By October 2003, the Red Pine County Sheriff's Office had compiled hundreds of interviews, witness statements, and physical evidence, yet nothing led them closer to Vanessa. The investigation continued in fits and starts over the following years. Officers retired, new detectives were assigned, and the case slowly faded from front-page news. Remembered mainly by those closest to Vanessa, her parents, her younger sister, and a small circle of friends who refused to let her memory dim. For decades, the Crawford family clung to hope. Each year on August 12th, the anniversary of her disappearance, they placed flowers at the spot near the bus stop where she was last seen. They lit candles, read excerpts from her diary, and shared stories of her life with neighbors and friends. Yet the pain of uncertainty never fully left. You hope she ran away, you hope she's safe, but the gnawing fear never ends, her mother, Helen Crawford, later told reporters. Every sunrise without her felt like a silent question we couldn't answer. It wasn't until 2019 that the case would finally crack open, in a way that neither the family nor investigators could have anticipated. A routine review of old evidence, a dusty envelope stored in the Red Pine County Police evidence locker, contained a cigarette butt collected near the edge of Pine Lake in August 2003. At the time, it was filed away, considered unremarkable, but with advancements in DNA extraction and genetic genealogy, that single, overlooked item would become the key to unlocking Vanessa's fate. Lieutenant Clara Jensen, of the newly formed Cold Case Division, took one look at the case file and the cigarette butt. She explained, "When we first received this material, we knew we had a challenge. It had been exposed to the elements, stored improperly by today's standards, but modern techniques allow us to develop profiles from minute, degraded samples. This was a breakthrough waiting to happen. The DNA extracted from the cigarette was male, and initial checks against the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, returned no matches. The trail once again seemed at a dead end. However, Lieutenant Jensen authorized the next step, forensic genetic genealogy, the same method that had identified suspects in several high-profile cold cases in the United States. By comparing the DNA against commercial genealogy databases, investigators looked for distant relatives, constructing family trees in reverse to trace the unknown perpetrator. Weeks of painstaking analysis narrowed the field to one family with strong regional ties to Red Pine County. In June 2020, investigators were ready to move. Surveillance and discreet DNA collection confirmed the identity of the suspect, Daniel Harper, a 42-year-old local contractor who had lived in Red Pine County at the time of Vanessa's disappearance. Harper was known in the community for his quiet demeanor, reliability, and volunteer work at local school projects. The revelation that someone so familiar could be implicated shook the small town to its core. Harper's home was searched under warrant, and investigators found a series of disturbing items: sketches of local landmarks, photographs of areas Vanessa frequented, and journal entries that suggested an obsessive interest in the teenager. More critically, they discovered a hidden room in the basement with personal effects of Vanessa: clothing, notebooks, and a backpack matching the description of the one she carried the day she disappeared. Every piece of evidence corroborated the DNA findings, establishing a clear link between Harper and Vanessa's abduction. News of the arrest spread rapidly through Red Pine County. Residents struggled to reconcile the image of a quiet, helpful contractor with the reality revealed by the investigation. Families in the community questioned their own judgments, realizing how someone could hide such darkness behind a veneer of normalcy. For the Crawford family, the arrest was a mixture of grief, relief, and lingering disbelief. "We finally know the truth," Helen Crawford said at a press conference. "We know what happened to our daughter, but nothing can undo the years of waiting, wondering, and fearing the unknown." The trial of Daniel Harper began in March 2021. Prosecutors presented the timeline meticulously, connecting the cigarette butt, the hidden belongings, and Harper's own movements in August 2003. Witnesses recounted Harper's presence near the bus stop, his known interactions with teenagers, and his unexplained absences on the day Vanessa vanished. Forensic experts demonstrated the reliability of DNA evidence and explained how even decades-old samples could be critical in solving crimes. After 10 days of testimony, including emotional statements from the Crawford family, the jury deliberated. Harper was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in quiet relief, a community finally confronting the truth and reclaiming a measure of peace after 17 years of unanswered questions. In the aftermath, Red Pine County established a cold case review unit inspired by Vanessa's case, ensuring that overlooked evidence, no matter how small, would receive renewed attention. Schools integrated discussions of her story into safety and community awareness programs. Art projects, scholarships, and memorials were created in Vanessa's honor, ensuring her life, rather than the circumstances of her death, remained the focus of collective memory. Though Harper's sentence brought closure, the legacy of Vanessa Crawford continued to ripple through Red Pine County. Families, investigators, and community members carried forward lessons about vigilance, preservation of evidence, and the quiet but persistent power of hope. The cigarette butt that had seemed insignificant in 2003 became a symbol of justice, proof that even small traces, preserved and respected, could unravel mysteries that had haunted families for decades. For the Crawford family, Vanessa's voice continues to resonate, not just through memories, but in scholarships, community projects, and advocacy for cold case investigations. Her story is a reminder that while evil can remain hidden for years, truth has a way of finding its way to light, and justice, however delayed, can still arrive. For 17 long years, the Red Pine County Sheriff's Office had kept Vanessa Crawford's case alive in memory, if not in active investigation. Every officer who had worked on it retired with her name in their files. Every volunteer who had searched the forests and lakes remembered the sight of her backpack, neatly set aside with her lunchbox untouched. The case had faded from national headlines. But for the Crawford family, and the few who never stopped looking, it had never gone away. In early 2020, Lieutenant Clara Jensen and her cold case division approached the Crawford case with the quiet confidence of modern forensic science. Every piece of evidence was reviewed, catalogued, and examined with a level of scrutiny unavailable in 2003. Even small details, long dismissed or forgotten, were re-examined. Among the items that caught the team's attention was a slip of paper tucked inside a notebook from Vanessa's room. It was barely legible, a note she had written that read, "If I disappear, follow the river." At the time of her disappearance, it had seemed like an idle adolescent musing. Now, with modern mapping and analysis, it became a critical clue. Jensen's team also re-examined photographs from local residents' cameras, many of which had been previously ignored. One image, taken from a security camera near the town library at 7:05 a.m., showed a red sedan idling suspiciously near the edge of the parking lot. At first, investigators had assumed it belonged to a parent or school staff, but cross-referencing vehicle registrations and prior interviews showed that the car was registered to Daniel Harper's parents at the time. Harper himself had been a 25-year-old contractor living in the area, quiet and unassuming, but with a known affinity for working in isolated parts of the county. DNA from the cigarette butt became the breakthrough, but it took months of genealogical work to trace it. Harper had no criminal record, so there were no matches in Codice. Genetic genealogists built a web of family relationships, starting with distant cousins who had uploaded their profiles to commercial databases. Each connection was painstakingly verified. Each branch of the family tree was mapped, cross-referenced with property records, phone logs, and social interactions. Within weeks, investigators had narrowed the field to Harper, the only individual who fit both genetically and geographically. When officers began discreet surveillance in early June 2020, Harper's patterns were unremarkable. He drove the same routes, visited the same hardware supply stores, and attended community events. His demeanor reinforced the image he had cultivated over the years: responsible, helpful, and entirely ordinary. He volunteered at school fundraisers, participated in local restoration projects, and was considered a quiet pillar of the small town. No one suspected the darkness that the investigation would soon reveal. The search warrant executed on Harper's home was meticulous. Investigators combed the property with teams of officers, forensic specialists, and criminal analysts. In the basement, they discovered a hidden room carefully concealed behind shelving units. Inside were journals, photographs, and personal items that had belonged to Vanessa. Each item was meticulously catalogued, and DNA testing confirmed that fibers and traces on the belongings matched samples taken from the crime scene in 2003. A lunchbox, her notebooks, and a backpack were preserved almost exactly as they had been when she disappeared. It was not only the physical evidence that pointed to Harper's guilt. Investigators uncovered a timeline of obsessive behavior leading up to and following Vanessa's disappearance. He had scouted the bus stop for weeks, recording times, movements, and routines. His journals reflected an unhealthy fixation, cataloging observations and personal details about Vanessa's life. Every entry, once dismissed as odd or irrelevant, now painted a clear picture of premeditation. Community reaction to the arrest was immediate and profound. Residents of Red Pine County struggled to reconcile the image of Harper, the volunteer, the contractor, the man who helped raise funds for school projects, with the predator that evidence revealed. Schools he had supported organized meetings to address the shock and provide counseling for students. Parents expressed disbelief, struggling to understand how someone so trusted could commit such an act and then maintain a quiet, ordinary life in their midst for nearly 2 decades. The Crawford family, now in their 50s and 60s, experienced a mix of relief and devastation. They finally had answers, but the years of uncertainty and grief could not be undone. Helen Crawford, Vanessa's mother, described the moment she learned of Harper's identity. "It was like the world shifted beneath my feet. We had lived with hope but also fear for so long. Knowing who was responsible didn't erase the pain, but it gave us the truth we had been searching for 17 years. In court, the prosecution presented a clear and detailed case. Every piece of evidence was laid out chronologically, emphasizing Harper's careful concealment and methodical planning. The cigarette butt, once considered trivial, was presented as the pivotal link, connecting him directly to Vanessa's disappearance. Forensic experts detailed the reliability of DNA extraction from decades-old samples, and crime scene analysts explained how fibers, hair, and environmental traces from the hidden room matched those collected in 2003. Witnesses described Harper's behavior over the years. Former neighbors recounted his quiet presence at local events, often going out of his way to appear helpful and trustworthy. Volunteers from the original search parties confirmed that he had been actively involved, even offering guidance to new searchers, a chilling reminder of how he had inserted himself into the investigation he was responsible for creating. Every account served to reinforce the prosecution's narrative. Harper had carefully crafted a life that masked the reality of his crime, ensuring he would remain above suspicion. The defense tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, emphasizing Harper's long-standing reputation in the community. They questioned the reliability of genetic genealogy and suggested that fibers and items in the hidden room could have been placed by another individual. But each claim collapsed under the weight of the forensic evidence and Harper's own behavioral patterns. Investigators presented digital enhancement of old photographs showing his presence near Vanessa's bus stop on the morning she disappeared, and careful mapping of his property indicated precise knowledge of local terrain and back roads. After a 10-day trial, the jury deliberated. The verdict was unanimous, guilty of first-degree murder. Harper was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, bringing closure to a case that had haunted Red Pine County for nearly 2 decades. In the courtroom, Helen Crawford and her family finally felt the possibility of healing. Though they acknowledged the long road ahead, the aftermath of Vanessa's case had profound effects on the community. Red Pine County established a dedicated cold case unit, ensuring that every unsolved disappearance would receive renewed attention. Schools incorporated her story into community safety programs, teaching students and parents about the importance of vigilance and evidence preservation. Scholarships in her name encouraged young women to pursue studies in environmental science and forensic investigation, ensuring her passions lived on in tangible ways. For law enforcement, the case became a model of the power of modern forensic science, the careful preservation of evidence, and the importance of revisiting cold cases with new technologies. Lieutenant Jensen emphasized, "Vanessa's case shows that even decades-old evidence can tell a story. Science has no expiration date, and patience combined with meticulous work can bring justice to victims and families long denied it." Red Pine County residents still grapple with the knowledge that someone they trusted had hidden such darkness in plain sight. But through remembrance, community projects, and the establishment of cold case protocols, Vanessa Crawford's story has become a symbol of resilience, hope, and the enduring pursuit of justice. Her memory, once shadowed by uncertainty, now serves as a guide for families, law enforcement, and communities nationwide, demonstrating that the truth, though delayed, will always find a way to the light. The arrest of Daniel Harper in June 2020 sent shockwaves through Red Pine County. For many, It was impossible to reconcile the quiet contractor and community volunteer they had known with the man responsible for Vanessa Crawford's disappearance 17 years earlier. Local news crews lined the streets outside the Red Pine County Sheriff's Office, broadcasting the moment officers led Harper away in handcuffs. Residents watched in disbelief as a life carefully curated for respectability unraveled in front of their eyes. Inside the courthouse, the trial was meticulously prepared. Prosecutor Elena Whitman presented a narrative that combined painstakingly collected forensic evidence with a reconstructed timeline. Security footage from 2003, enhanced with modern software, showed Harper lingering near Vanessa's bus stop. Fibers and DNA samples from the hidden room in his basement were compared with items recovered at the original crime scene, establishing irrefutable links. Most compelling, the cigarette butt Harper had discarded decades earlier, once considered insignificant, became the keystone of the case, connecting him directly to Vanessa at the precise time of her disappearance. Harper's defense attempted to paint him as a respected member of the community falsely, implicated by coincidence and modern forensic methods. They emphasized his decades of service at school fundraisers, his volunteer work in restoration projects, and his general reputation as reliable and trustworthy. But each argument was systematically dismantled. Witnesses recalled Harper's obsessive attention to Vanessa before her disappearance, including notes he took on her daily routines and repeated appearances near her school and home. Investigators also highlighted the meticulous concealment of evidence, demonstrating premeditation and intent. Throughout the trial, the Crawford family remained a quiet, resilient presence. Helen Crawford, now approaching 60, and her husband Mark, had spent nearly 2 decades living with uncertainty and grief. They listened intently as the prosecution presented every detail, from the initial disappearance to the painstaking reconstruction of Harper's activities over the years. "It's surreal," Helen whispered to her sister during a brief recess. "We spent 17 years imagining answers. Now here they are, clearer than we could have ever hoped." Her voice, heavy with emotion, captured the relief, anger, and sorrow that had defined their lives since 2003. The trial also uncovered disturbing evidence, the community's perception of him. He had positioned himself as a helpful neighbor, a guide to volunteer searchers, and a source of comfort to the Crawford family. The documents revealed a chilling pattern. Harper had not only committed the crime, but had taken deliberate steps to insert himself into the aftermath, observing the family's grief while maintaining his image as a pillar of the community. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came from digital enhancement of a photograph taken at the original search in 2003. The image, once overlooked, revealed Harper standing in a shadowed area near the wooded section where Vanessa's belongings were later discovered. The location, combined with his notes, established a clear premeditation pattern. The defense struggled to counteract the forensic timeline, the eyewitness accounts, and the genetic genealogy evidence linking Harper to Vanessa. By the 4th day of testimony, the emotional weight of the case became overwhelming. The Crawford family, who had endured 17 years of uncertainty, were confronted with the details of Vanessa's final moments through expert testimony and forensic reconstructions. Dr. Abigail Ross, the forensic anthropologist, described injuries consistent with defensive actions, showing that Vanessa had fought fiercely before her abduction. Each description was delivered with clinical precision, yet the human impact was undeniable. Family members, friends, and the courtroom audience were visibly shaken. On the 7th day, Harper shocked everyone by dismissing his attorneys and entering a guilty plea. In a monotone, emotionless voice, he recounted approaching Vanessa as she walked to the bus stop, offering a ride during the early morning drizzle. When she refused, he described becoming irrationally angry, leading to the events that ended her life. "I followed her and I couldn't control myself," he stated, pausing only to adjust the microphone. "I kept watching the aftermath for years. I was careful. No one suspected me." The courtroom fell silent. For the Crawfords, hearing the confession brought a complex mix of relief, sorrow, and a long-overdue acknowledgement of truth. The sentencing took place on August 3, 2020. Judge William Emerson, addressing Harper directly, spoke of the cruelty of his actions and the years of grief he imposed on Vanessa's family. "For 17 years you lived freely, hiding behind a facade of respectability, while a family endured unimaginable pain," the judge said. "Justice is delayed but not denied. You will spend the rest of your life accountable for what you have done." Harper was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For the Crawford family, the verdict marked a turning point. They finally had answers, though they knew the years lost could never be reclaimed. Community support poured in as residents rallied around the family, organizing memorial events and establishing scholarships in Vanessa's name. The scholarship program focused on environmental studies and youth leadership, reflecting Vanessa's passion for nature and her desire to make a difference. Her legacy, long overshadowed by mystery, was now a source of inspiration. The case had broader implications for law enforcement. The Red Pine County Cold Case Unit, empowered by the success of Vanessa's investigation, adopted new protocols for preserving evidence and re-examining unsolved cases. The use of genetic genealogy, combined with meticulous review of old records and modern forensic technology, became a model for solving other cold cases nationwide. Lieutenant Clara Jensen, reflecting on the investigation, said, "Vanessa's story is proof that no case is ever truly closed. Science, patience, and persistence can bring answers even decades later." For the residents of Red Pine County, Harper's arrest forced a reckoning with trust and appearances. Neighbors, former colleagues, and community members struggled to reconcile the man they had known with the predator who had hidden in plain sight. Schools implemented awareness programs, teaching students about the importance of safety, vigilance, and reporting suspicious behavior. The community collectively acknowledged the danger of misplaced trust, while also reaffirming the resilience that allowed them to support one another through 17 years of uncertainty. Vanessa's memory continues to live on. Each year, the scholarships awarded in her name support young women pursuing studies in science, community leadership, and justice. Her story has been featured in documentaries, highlighting the power of forensic genealogy and the importance of revisiting cold cases. Families across the country who have lived with unanswered questions now have tangible hope that truth, no matter how delayed, can be uncovered. For Helen and Mark Crawford, the final chapter was bittersweet. They had endured years of uncertainty, grief, and public scrutiny, but they finally had confirmation of what had happened to their daughter. Vanessa's story reminds us that no matter how long it takes, truth can prevail, Helen said at a memorial dedication in 2021. Her life mattered, her disappearance mattered, and now justice has finally caught up with her. The hidden room in Harper's home, once a repository of his obsession and evidence of his crime, has since been transformed into a training resource for law enforcement. Investigators study it as an example of how perpetrators can conceal evidence and manipulate perceptions. It serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the importance of thorough investigation and the value of patience, persistence, and modern science in uncovering the truth. Vanessa Crawford, silenced at 15, finally has her story told. The answers came after 17 years, but they have brought closure to her family, lessons to her community, and hope to other families still waiting for answers. Her case underscores a critical truth. Time may pass, but evidence endures, and the diligent pursuit of justice can illuminate even the darkest corners of human behavior. For law enforcement and communities alike, Vanessa's story is a call to action. Every cold case deserves attention, Every family deserves truth, and every victim, no matter how long ago, deserves justice. Through her legacy, Vanessa Crawford continues to speak, not just to those who knew her, but to a nation reminded that perseverance, science, and